welcome to the Oral History Project of Criminology. We're pleased to have with us Alex Piquero here today for an oral history interview. We are at the Academy of Criminal Justice Sciences meeting in Las Vegas, Nevada in 2022. I am here, Jay Albanese, with Wesley Jennings, and we're going to interview Alex about his life and career in criminology. Alex, to start, I think an appropriate place would be to talk about your early life, the way that you found yourself into university to begin with. You have an interesting backstory.
Yeah, complete serendipity, Jay. Everybody always has this life plan, and it never happened to me in terms of what I thought was going to happen. Mm-hmm. So my mom and dad were teenage Cuban political refugees who were dating in high school, and then Fidel Castro took power. And then that was the end of their life in Cuba. My dad was actually a semi-pro baseball player and was being scouted by the Washington Senators at the time for a contract. So my mom took a plane ride on Pan Am from Havana to Miami, and then took a Greyhound bus to Washington, D.C. And that's where she started her life as a teenager. My dad went on a boat, not a Norwegian cruise line boat, but a different kind of boat, and he went to Jamaica, to Bilbao, Spain, and then to Harlem in the 1960s. My dad's first job was a busboy, because that's what a lot of immigrants can do. And he was a busboy at a legendary bar called Toots Shore, where a lot of the Yankees would go hang out after the games, because back then, baseball players weren't in the same kind of physical condition that they're in today. So they stayed in touch, writing letters. Of course, there was no cell phone and texting and computers or anything like that back then. And my dad ended up moving to Washington, D.C., and they started a life together. And so I have an older brother who is an aerospace engineer, so he's the smarter of the two brothers in the household. He lives in the Cape Canaveral. He builds rockets, finds rockets, does all kinds of stuff with rockets. And I'm a social scientist. Growing up as a kid, I grew up in a baseball household. My dad was, pro baseball player, and so I, had a tire in my backyard when we had enough money to find a house. Growing up as a kid, we were in an apartment with my mom's parents. We didn't have a TV, so I grew up listening to baseball games. And so, that's how my dad listened to baseball games when he was a kid. So I grew up in that kind of household. And my dad always said, we're going to throw another couple hours. We're going to throw another couple hours, because right now there's someone throwing another couple hours that you're not. So growing up as a kid, the only mentality I knew is work, 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 and that's the way you would get by. So all through high school, I was a baseball player, played hockey too, and then realized that I wasn't as good as half the kids who were my age, even though I was a 16-year-old guy and I thought I was. Yeah, sure. And I got into the University of Maryland, and what was interesting about Maryland was I was going to be a radio, television, and film major, because I was playing in bands, rock bands. And so there's a story about rock bands and hotspots. Mm-hmm. And so I thought, rock bands, what kind of best job is that? And radio, television, film major, I was a DJ at the University of Maryland. I played records, normally. And the spring semester of my first year, one of my classes didn't make. And as you all know, drop ad wasn't on the computer back then. You had to go wait in line. So at the University of Maryland, there's a building called the Armory, and you'd literally wait in line, and you got to the front of the line and say, okay, this is what's open. And the only class open at 11 a.m., because I didn't want to have an early class, on Tuesday and Thursday, because I wanted to be twice a week, was an Intro to Criminal Justice class. And I'm like, perfect, I take class. First day of the class, a woman who's still on the faculty at Maryland, Dr. Lori Weber Brooks, brought the topic to life. And literally brought it was not just the material, it was her enthusiasm in the classroom. And I was like, this is, I'm gonna come. So I went home to my parents. I was still living with my mom and dad. And I said, I want to do this. And like, what are you're gonna be a police officer? I'm like, I don't know, but this is a really cool topic, and it sounds good. So it was great. Lori took me under. I worked on a research project with her. We surveyed officers in Baltimore, Maryland. It's time about police stress. We presented my first paper in San Francisco ASC, and this must have been 89, 90, or 91. And it was great, and I was really nervous, and she calmed me down. Later, I would find out that Bob Bursick always told me that he got very nervous every time he would give a talk. He used to be under the white curtain, and he'd be shaking his legs. And he goes, if you're not nervous, you don't care. And so to this day, I always remember, you can be confident, but you're still going to be nervous because you really care about the delivery of the message. And so I continued going through undergrad, and then one summer I took a class by a person who became my mentor, one of my best friends, Ray Paternoster. It was juvenile delinquency class. And remember the first day Ray came to class, he came in a Lakers jersey. Oh, the jersey. I took it in the summer. I'm like, this guy sounds, Magic Johnson jersey. I'm like, okay, this guy sounds good. So, and for anybody who knows Ray or has been in part of Ray's presence, understands the magnetism that Ray has, not just for the intellect, but the bringing the subject to light. And it was great JD class. We read Branningham and Branningham. We read Platt's History of the Juvenile Court. Never forget these books, classic books. And Ray said, I want you to work on this project for me. And he goes, I said, what's the project? He goes, we're going to interview people who are on juries in death penalty cases in Baltimore. I'm like, okay, sounds good. First interview, I went North Baltimore. For those of y'all not familiar with North Baltimore, it's not where the Inner Harbor is. It's not where the stadiums are. And the first woman I interviewed, I said, well, tell me about your weighing of aggravating and mitigating circumstances. And she looks at me and she goes, what's an aggravating circumstance? And I went, oh my gosh, this was your job. And this was only 6 months ago. And I remember telling Ray, and wrote out my findings, Ray said, you should go to grad school. What's grad school? None of my parents went to college. So I went home that day and I told my mom, I said, oh yeah, Ray thinks I need to go to grad school. And my parents were like, what's that? This is a classic immigrant dream. So I went to grad school, got my master's and PhD in 2 years each, 4 years total, and then started my academic career. But apropos that we're here in Las Vegas because March of '96, I had just finished my dissertation and starting my academic career just a few months later at Temple University. And I was at the Riviera Hotel and sat in an oral history project interview with Travis Hershey. And how interesting the world turns some 25, 26 years later that we're in the same city and I'm on the other side of this camera. So it's a huge honor for me to be here.
Yeah, life is crazy, isn't it?
It is crazy.
You have a very interesting, backstart to your whole career.
I think the origin, it's clear that obviously sports has, is a high importance in your family, right, with your father and obviously yourself, athletic, right? I know you're always avid runner and fitness, right, expert. So just curious on how you see the intersection between sports and criminology, because obviously you've dabbled a lot in that work in the publishing arena too.
Yeah, it's a great question, Wes. And Wes is a UF grad, so I got to do the obligatory chomp here. We got to keep this kind of light. I think that the lessons that I learned in sports have translated really well to my academic career, not just in terms of research, but teaching, mentoring, and so on. And that is, you can always get better. We see LeBron James for 2 hours, or Michael Jordan for 2 hours, or Wayne Gretzky for 2 hours, right? Or Tom Brady for 3 hours. Again, by the way, or one more time. And we don't see all of the other work they put into this. The hours in the gym, the hours sitting at the free throw line, the hours throwing 30-yard balls down. We don't see that, right? We see them when they're peaked. But the reason how they got to the peak is all of the time and energy they put in. So the lessons I learned from my dad and playing sports, my dad always said there's always going to be someone better. He said, your goal is to be better the next day. And so, as a grad student, at Maryland, it was just a phenomenal place. I mean, at that time, it was like lightning in a bottle. Charles Welford was the chair. He amassed this rock star faculty. I mean, just crazy. They were all around. There was great, exciting research coming out at the time. And I remember Ray would always say, you can write that sentence better. Just go back, do it again, do it again. And and sports is a lot like that. You're gonna go to batting practice. You're gonna throw more free throws. You can always improve. And so I think the lessons of sports is you lose by losing. You gain by losing, and you gain by people who are playing better than you. So in my academic career, I've worked with lots of people, and I look to that because I want to learn and get better. And it's always, and you and I have worked our entire careers together, and it's always like, well, what did I learn from you? What can I get out of what you did this time? And I'm constantly reading. I mean, you all the time in grad school, that's when you have the time to read. You don't have time to read when you're a faculty member, obviously, because you're pulled in every direction in the world, being current chair, former chair. And it's constantly, what are people asking now? Where's the future going? And so I think sports and academia have a whole lot in common. but there's no substitute for hard work.
Yeah, absolutely.
Zero.
Kind of a couple takeaways, right? There's never a perfect season,
Nope.
right? and keep putting in the work.
Keep putting in the work. And now, 26 years later in my careers, I work just as hard, but I don't work because I love what I do.
Mm-hmm.
Well, for me, we can't go any further without answering the question that I'm most interested in, and that is the most important decision you've made in your life, and that is, of course, marrying Nikki.
Absolutely.
And you and Nikki
On record for that.
I'm on the record.
You and Nikki are kind of a power couple in criminology, so we'd like to hear what the story is, how you guys found each other.
It's a great story. So this goes back a long time, won't date that, but we met at a rock band rehearsal. So in Beltsville, Maryland, which is a suburb of DC. And her friend was dating my friend. My friend was a drummer in a band. And her friend, they were dating. So, the band rehearsals, they take a 10, 15-minute break. And so her friend and my friend go off. And I'm like, okay. Serendipity, I went to the rehearsal, Nikki went to the rehearsal, and we met each other. And an important element of my career will be serendipity. And I'm like, I'm hungry. It's like 7 o'clock at night. So there was a Wendy's across the street from this warehouse. So go to Wendy's, and they make the burgers, in Square. And after Wendy's, there was a 7-Eleven next door. And 7-Eleven's an important place in the history of Alex and Nikki. So I got a Slurpee. If anybody from the Mid-Atlantic knows, it's 7-Elevens and Slurpees. So I got a Slurpee, and this is going to sound really cheesy, but hey, it's on record, I don't care. At the counter, there were roses in little plastic tubes.
Sure.
I'm like, I'm going to get this rose and give it to this girl who I just met. And so I come back to the car with Slurpees and this plastic rose. And I'm like, yeah, I got it. And we've been together every day since. We dated for a long period of time, all through grad school for both of us. And then our entire academic career. We got married in '97, and we will be celebrating our 25th wedding anniversary this May. We will be going to the Monaco F1 Grand Prix, which we were supposed to do in 2020 and in 2021, and now hopefully in 2022. So we will fly, put this on record, from Miami. We'll land in Paris. We'll have our anniversary in Paris, and the next day go to Monaco to spend the weekend watching the Formula One race cars. But the thing with being married to an academic, and it takes a special person to be married to an academic because it's hard to turn this off because if you care, you're constantly thinking. But it's all the stuff that academics deal with on a daily basis that people who are not academics understand. Nikki understands that, but she's my, I think, biggest champion and my biggest critic. We throw out ideas at each other all the time and constantly, and we get better by saying, hey, what did you think about it this way? And it's constantly pushing each other to improve upon the thinking and the clarity. And when we write together, she reduces my word count a lot. But it's been a really great ride. It's neat to have someone who, like her, who's accomplished so much at the stage of her career, but also to have the ambitions that she wants to have. You're always sacrificing in a relationship, whether they're two academics or two couples who have jobs, and there's never a perfect, but at the end of the day, the perfect is the couple, and you can't lose sight of that.
And it all began with the rose at 7-Eleven.
It all began with the rose at 7-Eleven, but hey, every rose does not have its thorn.
Yeah, apparently not.
I think that needs to be worked into a title of one of your.
I should try
papers,
that, right? You gotta make
plastic rose and 7-Eleven colon something else afterwards, right?
Identifying the correlates of.
Yeah, absolutely. Washi stays or something, right?
Yes. Absolutely.
Yeah. So Alex, obviously you've widely published in your career on a whole range and a host of topics. Various theoretical frameworks, methodological pieces, thought pieces, policy pieces. It'd be interesting to, at least in your own interpretation, how you would what's the common thread that you would pull through that large body of disparate but impactful work?
I want to think that I ask good questions, whatever those questions are. And a lot of that came from my graduate statistics training by Doug Smith. And Doug, this was before SPSS and Stata and SAS, and we learned statistics in a matrix algebra program called GALS, which had no help system. You just got to figure it out. But we would code likelihood functions. This is how we learned statistics at Maryland. And it was great. And Doug said, and Doug had this way where you go to his office and it'd be like a 2-hour discussion. It wasn't like, hey, I got a quick question. It was like, it's 2 hours later. But Doug was great. And Doug never gave you the answer, but you come back, he give you a little, you come back, give you a little, you come back, and it was this process. And Doug said, find a question no one's asked, answer it yes or no, and it's interesting regardless of how it comes out. And I've tried to follow that throughout the course of my career. And you correctly pointed out that I've done a lot of different work in lots of different areas. I remember early in my career, one of my faculty colleagues said to me, you're too much of a generalist. And I said, and that's bad, why? And we went in this back and forth. And I was a brand new assistant professor who thought I was great. And I said, look, and I've tried to model my career out of people like Al Bloomstein, Jeff Fagan, those kinds of people who've written on all of the different kinds of things with all kinds of theories, all kinds of policies, and all kinds of methods. I think I'm going to keep following those kinds of people in my career.
Not a bad model.
Yeah, I've been, and they've been very close friends and supporters of mine. I've written with both of them extensively. But they're also good models of asking good questions. And to me, I see questions all over. I mean, it's just, we're criminologists, but we're social scientists. And if we're taught correctly, we should see research in all matters and all aspects of the world. And I read something and, this sounds really cool. Let's go down this hole for a while. And, one of the things that's really good is paying attention to what's happening in the world. And then saying, okay, where can we go next? And, Welford wrote this great piece in '89 about theoretical paralysis. And then Gottfriedson and Hershey comes out, and then all the life course stuff comes out. And I just happened to be in grad school when all of that was happening. And so that was extremely exciting. And I remember asking John Lobb this question at an AAC. I said, John, do you think life course is going to last? He goes, I don't know what the life course criminology is going to be like. And lo and behold, here we are.
Kind of a big thing.
And you never know. You don't know what you don't know, and so you never can predict where the future is going to be theoretically, methodologically, policy-wise. As I've gotten older, some of my interests have shifted, but I keep coming back to some of those same kinds of themes over and over again because I read other people's stuff and I learn from those people. So I think the theme for me is he asks good questions. They're good questions.
Yeah, that's terrific. And when you look at your background, I mean, you have authored and co-authored, by my last count, well over 400 articles. That's right, 400. And it's very interesting. What I also find interesting is that you have, when you look at many people in the field, they have the same group that they work with for most of their career, where you have a whole variety of folks that you work with sometimes, and then other groups of folks. So how have you managed the co-author relationships?
Yeah, it's, fortunately for me, they've all been productive and good. And I think everybody brings something useful to the table. I think the field, most social sciences, not just criminology, but psychology for sure, no one writes by themselves anymore. And I think the reason why is because we are a interim multidisciplinary view of our dependent variable. There are different people who have different kinds of skill sets. And I've sought to learn from those people over the course of my career. And one thing that's been constant throughout my career, to go back to Wes's question, was working with graduate students. Everybody's like, they're just, kind of like running the table for you, running up. No, they're an instrumental part of the research. And when I write with grad students, and even when I write with faculty, it's like, if you disagree with what I wrote or how we did it, let's do it better. Because I remember having a conversation with Ken Dodge about this one day. He's a very famous psychologist, and Ken goes, keep your eye on the prize. And the prize is what's the best possible science you can produce. And I remember talking to Rob Sampson about this, and he said him and Lobb would go and argue over words in sentences. And I'm like, I'm not doing that too often. I mean, whatever. But Rob and John are really good examples of the kinds of scholars we strive to be. So I think for me, the groups didn't just happen. It's like, when we start writing, I have the same blank white word screen that everybody else has. It's blank. So you got to sit down and put the thing to work. But people have sought me out, and I've sought other people out. But at the beginning of my career, I didn't have any of those networks. So I helped create those networks. I was introduced to some people, obviously, over the course of my career. But it's been instrumentally beneficial to the development of my thinking, because I'm working with people in different disciplines. I mean, all over the place. And I remember talking to some psychology friends of mine when we were designing the Pathways to Desistance study. She's like, we got to collect the PCL, the psychopathy checklist. I'm like, come on, we need a psychopathy checklist that has some arbitrary cut point. Lo and behold, it was the right decision, and we've done a lot of work in that area. So I think for me, it's how can I improve the next day, and if I got to go work with these people tomorrow, then let's do it. Let's have some fun.
Yeah, that's interesting. And also, you've done a lot of work with the National Academy of Sciences.
Yeah.
Now, for those who don't know, the National Academy of Sciences is a very big deal, founded by Abraham Lincoln to provide scientific advice to the government. And you've been on a series of panels with them. And the interesting thing is, here now, you're working with people, all of whom are experts. So how have you found that kind of thing when you're focused on
being in a room with 12 other people who are smarter than you is like being in school. It's like I just want to sit here and listen to you, because you're right, Jay. It's a complete interdisciplinary mix of people who are incredibly intellectual people, and we're all brought to a task. As you all know, the NAS has specific tasks of a report, and there's recommendations, and there's findings, and there's a lot of nuances. But we're trying to advise an external agency, whether it's NIJ or DJS or whatever it is, about this particular issue, or if it's a study group on their particular study. But you're surrounded by all of these people who are just intellectual giants, and it's just like I just want to sit back and listen. And you never want to pause in that. I remember sitting on one of these panels with Chuck Ramsey, who at that time was chief of police in Washington, D.C. And Chuck is a BlackBerry, so Chief's BlackBerry is going off, and at like 9 a.m, we'd just gotten there, and I was like, what's going on? He goes, it's another robbery. And I'm like, geez, it's real. It's like real, right? We see rows and columns. He sees people, right, on a day-to-day basis. And he looks at me, he goes, Alex, I love RCTs, randomized control. I love them. I just can't wait 5 years for the answer, because I got to deal with the robbery today. And so I never thought about that before. It's like, we need the science to be long-term, because we need follow-up and so on. But for people in the real world, yeah, they need that, but they need something else right now. And so that's one of the things I learned from being on those panels, is that you also meet people who are not academics, but who appreciate the academic world and what it can bring. So anytime the NAS ever asks me to do something, it's yes. I don't really care what the topic is, because I know I'm going to learn.
Fascinating stuff.
You obviously, teaching, research, and service, right, are the 3 pillars of academic careers generally. You have a long history of, academic administration experience, right, in terms of associate dean for, the graduate programs, and currently department chair. Just curious as to your thoughts on how that 4th piece, of that additional element of the job, how you value that, and how you think it informs the other 3 pieces.
As a current chair right now, you fully understand the pressures that you get this way and the pressures that you get this way, and here you are in the middle. I've learned it's a different set of problem solving. When you're writing an article or doing an analysis, or going to the UN to give advice, as Jay does, to lots of people over the course of his career, and manage the International Center for NIJ, you're solving different problems in different ways. And I think about that as, when a faculty member comes to me and says, look, I need $500, I need to get this data set or whatever. Okay, good, let me find that way to do that for you, because then you can go be successful and be, famous. And that's my goal now as a chair, as an administrator, is how can I help you get what you need to get to that next level. And so it's frustrating, as you know, because you're constantly getting asked for something, and you want to help people succeed. And so when you can do that and solve their problem, you can move the needle and make someone else's life better. So it's helped me also understand how universities operate at all layers of the institution. And Nikki has extensive administrative experience as well. And so and as a faculty member sitting in your office writing articles, you don't know anything, right? You're just write my article, teach my class, and go home night.
Right. And
then in administration, it doesn't turn off because there's always someone who needs a problem or solved. And I remember, when I was at UT Dallas, the provost there at the time asked Nikki and I if we liked music. I said, sure, love music. He goes, we're going to do the symphony tonight. I'd never been to a symphony before. So Nikki and I go to the symphony with Dr. Hobson Wildenthal, who recently passed, and his wife. And I asked, first time I went to dinner with the provost in my life. I have an idea what provosts do, but not a real good idea. And I said, so, how many emails do you get a day? He said, 400 or 500.
Oh, my God. Wow.
And I said, how many of those are important? I'll never forget this. He goes, to the person who sent it, it's the most important thing. And so I learned a really important lesson, is that you always have to listen. And what he would do is he would write back and say, I don't have time to solve this right now, but I'll get back to you. And so people then felt, okay, thank you for letting me know that you received this. And so I understood another layer then above a grad director or a chair, because now a provost is getting it from all over, right? 600 faculty, 30,000 students, alums, parents, donors. So you get a real big appreciation of just how small we are, but it's like a piece of the jigsaw puzzle. And that's why I think about building research. We're this part of the jigsaw puzzle, and then, this scientific studies this part of the jigsaw puzzle, and we're building this 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle. So I've learned to appreciate the pressures that deans and provosts have. And I wish I could apologize to a lot of my former chairs and deans and provosts for not knowing what I should have known. But you don't know what you don't know. So it's been really good. There's frustration. Budgets are hugely frustrating. Sure. Scheduling classes is frustrating.
Oh, yeah, that's a never-ending job.
When it comes down to raises, that's a frustrating conversation. So, but it's part of the job, and you don't do it for the dollars or the course release. You do it because how can I serve better and or differently? And I think it's really important for everybody to take their turn so they can see what it's like when they complain that, we all complain. But right. I think, at the end of the day, it's been more helpful in my career than I thought it would have been.
Yeah. And building on that, when you get into the service aspect, you've done a lot of work in your career with everybody from journalists, mayor's offices, police departments. How do you find working all that in terms of, your high level of scholarly productivity and everything else you do in terms of that sort of community service that sometimes is linked to research, but sometimes is not?
Yeah, it took me a long time to get to that point. I think this is an important issue that all the social sciences have now. Is the impetus to change policy. Let's talk about informing policy first and getting research at the table, and then we can think about everything else, subsequent to that. It took me a while, I think, Jay, to have confidence in myself to actually know what I'm talking about. My first 10 years of my career, I was just trying to build my research portfolio. I didn't know what I was doing, in terms of advising a mayor, a police chief. I didn't know anything, and I didn't feel like I had enough to contribute. But then I started to feel more confident, and then it was just a call here or a call there. Hey, Alex, can you let us know the answer to this particular question? And mayors and chiefs talk, and people Google everything in the world, and it's been incredibly rewarding to bringing my research to outside of academia and journals. And I'll tell you why. Different people need different data in different ways for different reasons. So I've given talks at Rotaries. I've given talks at retirement centers right after lunch. Trust me, it's great. I've given talks at a program called Sips in Science, where you actually go give a talk during a happy hour at a bar. But what I have found is that it helps me talk about my research program or research study to different people in a different way. It's made my writing better. It's translational criminology. John Lobb came up with a great point when he became the NIJ director about how do we make this in a way that people can understand. And I try to tell my students, it's like You got to be able to, your elevator ride. You got 30 seconds or 3 minutes. So talk about yourself in 30 seconds or talk about yourself or research in 3 minutes. Because you're either going to get up at the 5th floor or you're going to go to the 50th floor. And so I've thought more carefully about doing that. And I think now for me, it's not about your name's in the newspaper. Oh, this person, the mayor called you. That's not the point. The point is when officials seek you out, they need help. And the fact that they want scientific community to help them, we got to say yes. We can't say no, because then you're just going to give into the, oh, well, we don't affect policy. We can't. Well, you got to answer the phone, and you got to go to those 10 meetings and deal with the frustration to get the result at the end. So, as you know, you make time.
Yeah, from somewhere.
From somewhere.
Yeah, Alex. So it's obviously, Jay's, mentioned earlier how you published with, so many individuals over the course of your career, and obviously a large element of that, as you've mentioned as well, is graduate students, right? So it'd be interesting to know just your kind of thoughts about your role as a mentor in general, and then guidance for how future academics should approach kind of building their mentorship approach to kind of continue that lineage.
Yeah. This is a personal one because you're next to me. Seeing you succeed is the reward for me. That's what being a mentor is about. And, I always think about students as teach me something I don't know. And you go down this path and you discover something, and then we all learn. So for me, that's a first reward. And then the second reward is, and I don't mind saying this personal, is when you've won your awards in your career, and then you write me a note. And I just gleefully, happily that evening, because it's seeing you succeed, and I know you're doing the exact same thing with your students, and we just create this generation of mentorship that goes on and on and on and on. And I think the people who I've tried to model my career after have done just that. So I was a little bit purposeful about what it means to be a mentor, because you're literally taking someone who, into your life and helping them help themselves down the road. And I take it seriously. When Ray was my advisor, Ray would turn out round drafts in a day. So I turn around drafts in a day, maybe 2 days. Because I know what it was like when you run a model or you turn in a chapter and you're like, oh, was that the worst? Oh, did I make a mistake? You're like waiting. You're like, I know what that anxiety is like. And so I try to lower some of that anxiety, but I also try to sometimes you have to rein students in the sense of, look, this is your dissertation. You have 30 years ahead of you. Right. Let's just think about the long term here.
Let's go down from 12 research questions to like 2.
Ask a couple and move on. And so, there's nothing more rewarding than that. Nothing. Zero.
That's terrific. Now, one other thing I think that distinguishes you from many is your involvement with journals. You were editor of the Journal of Experimental Criminology. You're currently the editor of the Justice Evaluation Journal. And last I looked, you're on something like 10 other journal editorial boards.
Yeah.
That's a lot of journal activity.
Mm-hmm.
How have you incorporated that in your career, and has that brought you any benefit or more headaches?
The absolute benefit is it's not a headache at all, because you learn, and you learn how other reviewers review the same document you did. So I constantly look at what the other reviewer says. Like, well, what did they see that I didn't see? And why didn't they see what I saw? And why didn't I see what they saw? So for me, it's all about learning. And so I'm on psych review editors boards, or SOC boards, crim boards, and it's constantly learning through that process. But I also know that we as faculty researchers, we owe it to the journals to review. And I don't mind saying this right now, we have a journal editor next to me, current one, the last 2 years has been very difficult finding reviewers.
Absolutely.
Editing Justice Evaluation Journal right now. And it's like, you have no problem submitting a manuscript, But how about reviewing the manuscripts? And I don't mind saying this publicly, is it goes both ways. I mean, we all live in a community of scholars, and our job is to help one another. And important, yeah, it's not counted for anything at tenure. That's nonsense. It counts because it's the right thing to do. And sometimes in life, you do what's right, regardless of whether or not it's counted. And I find it difficult to say no.
Yeah, that's something.
Yeah, so obviously we're certainly focused on your illustrious career and all the aspects regarding that, but I'd like to know a little bit more about your free time, although you don't have much, but obviously you are involved in things outside of Alex the Academic.
Absolutely. So you can't talk about free time without my wife. We have 2 rituals every day. Well, 3. Working out, which is real important to me. Healthy body, healthy mind, without a doubt. We read the newspaper in our hands. I grew up in DC, so I read the Washington Post growing up, so I can't not have a newspaper in my hand. So we have coffee, read that every morning of our lives, always. And at night we sit down and watch the local news, and we talk about our day and stuff. So those are 2 what may seem to be things that are like mundane, but to me the beauty's in the mundane. So those are a couple things. We love sports. We love Broadway, and thank God Broadway's back. Went to 2 shows already, min mask, but it is what it is. So we are real big into the theater. We're big into music, and we love to cook, all kinds of things, a lot of desserts. That's why you run half marathons or whatever.
Run to the donut shop.
And we go to the donut shop every Saturday, no doubt about it. That's what you think about when you're drenched in sweat after 12 miles. So I think the exercise, the cooking, the Broadway stuff, playing with our dog, those are all important hobbies. And we've lived through crazy the last couple of years. I know it's going to date this, but it's the reality of the world when people see this 30 years from now. You've grown to appreciate that tomorrow's not given. Mm-hmm. You can, a lot of people plan for tomorrows. I think about hoping for tomorrow. I hope I get to do this tomorrow. And so I try to appreciate even the littlest things in the world every single day. Because anything we've seen in the last couple of years, that's not going to be given for a lot of people in this world. And so I think that I have a lot of hobbies outside. You gotta be able to do fun stuff. And I love sports. I'll watch any game on ESPN. I don't care if it's D3. I don't care what it is. Just put it on.
Even the 8 Ocho, the bizarre sports.
Absolutely. Just if something's on, I'm watching.
Right.
And that's the thing. This is not academia and research. And it's not a competition against other people. It's a competition against yourself. Mm-hmm. And that's what I love about sports is that, people are competing. They're trying their best. In 1980, when the U.S. men's Olympic team hockey beats the Russians 4-3, and now Michaels is calling this. I'll never forget watching this. No one would ever thought they would have won the game. And so, just goes to show you that, you don't know what you can produce, and you can always become better by working harder.
Right, and here you are, your career is extremely well established. You are a senior scholar, but you're still a young man in as much as you have a lot of years to go to contribute. So going forward in the future, how do you see your career going, especially given current trends in the field and the state of criminology in general? I
really enjoy working with public officials. At this stage in my career, I still like writing articles, don't get me wrong. There's still that energy of writing it. That, oh my God, that turned out that way. That's really a cool finding. There's a lot of energy in that. But it's also really pleasing, when like in Miami a couple days ago, the local domestic violence board called me up. Hey, tell me about this. Or yesterday I did an interview with the Milwaukee newspaper. Tell us about what you think about this. And, and I say no to some of those requests, like we all do. But I get a lot of enjoyment out of that because I'm helping them, but they're also helping me. Because sometimes they bring me stories that I didn't know about that case in Milwaukee. That's really interesting. I didn't know that the Milwaukee crime data looks that way. So to me, it's always like, well, what can I learn out of this conversation? So I've gotten a lot of enjoyment in doing that and this part of my career. But I can't do that had I not done everything else before that. And there was a lot of sacrifice to get to this point. I mean, there's a lot of times, at the beginning of my career, Nikki was still in grad school at Maryland. My first job was at Temple in Philly, and we decided to have a marriage where we saw each other every night. So we lived in Baltimore. She commuted south. It's an hour, and anything we're in DC is at least an hour. Right. I drove to Philly 3 or 4 days a week. That's 2 hours in a car each way on a good day, without rain. But I used that time to think. And we came home, we ate dinner, and we worked. And some people might say, well, that's too much work. Well, I mean, you have to sacrifice some things in life to get other things that you want later on down in life. So I think right now that's what I enjoy a lot. But it doesn't mean I enjoy that over everything else. It's like, I like all these things. It's like a buffet. It's like, I like to do this, I like to have this, I like to do this.
That is terrific.
So that kind of follow up on that, so Alex, reflecting back on your last 25 years, right? What do you envision the next 25 would be?
Well, more of the same would be a boring answer.
Wouldn't be a bad replication.
But I've loved every day of my professional career. Like all of you, this isn't work. This is you love it. It's like you look forward to. You don't necessarily look forward to seeing the review decision when you submit a manuscript, but you look forward, reviewers too. You look forward to the job of the next day, teaching the class. I love teaching undergrads. I'm teaching this huge undergrad class. It's just so much fun, doing that kind of stuff. So I don't want to do a lot of changing in my career, but I'm always open to what's behind door number 3, and is door number 3 going to lead me down a different path had I not known about that door? And I think a lot of things I tell grad students all the time is, look, don't shut any doors in your career because they're going to be shut for you. So keep them all open because you don't know 5 years from now or 10 years from now where you're going to be in your professional life or your personal life. I'm sure when you started your career, one of the most famous Rutgers PhD graduates, you went to Rutgers, but we'll leave that for another day. I'm just kidding. We got a Gator, we got a Rutgers guy, and it's Herb. And they go into a bar. I don't think you ever envisioned, I'm going to be directing the International Center at the NIJ when you first started your career. Yeah. You don't envision what life happens, serendipity happens. And so you got to be open to having those conversations. Some say, hey, have you ever thought about this? It's like, no, I've never thought about that. So let me think about that. I'm sure that, John Lobb didn't finish grad school at SUNY Albany and say, I'm going to be the NIJ director one day. Or when Dan Nagin, finished his PhD at Carnegie Mellon, and his first job was working in taxes, and then he's going to be one of the most important criminologists of our time. You don't think 25. You're kind of like this path. But one of the great things I think about bringing life course in criminology, which is very important to my career, is you got to allow for life events to happen. There is human agency, but there's also these shocks that come your way that you don't know, and you got to be able to understand and see what that opportunity is. Just because it's there doesn't mean you see it. And I think that that's something I've gotten to do better in the course of my career.
Hard to do. Is there anything else that you would like to add that we haven't talked about? There's so many interesting aspects of your life and career.
Well, there are so many. But I will say this.
Wait for part 2.
Wait for the sequel. Played by...
the Fast and Furious franchise. There's 12 movies to come.
That's right. Number 24, coming soon. The Rock will be there. The one thing I'll say is that one of the coolest things about this with you two is learning from you in your career when I was in grad school, and then being a small part of your career when you were in grad school. And so this is one of these things, and I think really carefully about not just social networks, but the generations of criminologists. And we all stand on the shoulders of giants. And I know that phrase gets used around all the time, but it is, when you really sit and read those words and you think about them, that's exactly what this interview has been for me. So I can't thank you all enough for spending an hour of your life in lovely downtown Las Vegas.
We appreciate you doing it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thanks,
thank
man.
you, Alex.
Thanks.